I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. This is the December 14th meeting of the Clinton Public Schools School Committee. This meeting is being held both in person and remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts' March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Section 20. This remote meeting can be accessed via Google Meet technology. At this time, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the bills.
So moved.
So moved. I'll second.
Motion having been made and seconded, any discussion? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Could we have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting held December 3rd, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Motion having been made and seconded, any discussion? There being none, all those in favor? Unanimous as well. Do we have anyone here for public comment this evening, or failing someone present, any comment from our viewers online?
I think we actually have the Board of Health here. I think I have them ahead of public comment on the agenda, so we could entertain them first, and we could see if any public comment comes in online.
That makes sense, yeah. Thank you.
So we met with there was a department chair meeting today at the town hall. We met with the Board of Health. We're in as we updated throughout this whole thing, we're in pretty constant contact with the Board of Health. And so we have two members of the Board of Health, Steve Lipka and Tom Bonsi here, to just kind of talk to us a little bit about what's going on, sort of the current trends we're seeing, and how that could factor into things like our learning model, getting kids back into school, and what their take is on that, and sort of our the prospect of winter sports, and what their thoughts are on that. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to share, Steve or Tom.
Well, and as you come up, let me just say thank you, gentlemen, for all of your work since March. This has been not anything that any of you on your board signed up for, and we really appreciate the partnership.
Just going to give you a little update from last week. Numbers, we had 82 that came on board, and the total numbers as of this afternoon, we have 665 total. Right now, 197, and we got 568 So from last week, our trend, we just added another 12 this morning. It's just continuing right now and rising.
Those numbers, we had our most we get, 82 cases. I think the most part of that was in the 50s. The young and the red trending up. Don't know what the percentage will be, we'll find out on Thursday. But with these cases going away, they've already decided to close public buildings to the public, night weapon only. The governor took a step back, phase 3 to phase 1, and news today, Boston is starting to shut things down on phase 2. So that's where we're at right now. I think we're going to be in the red for the unforeseeable future, probably through at least for the rest of this month, until we get to the holidays. We don't see anything slowing it down right now. I know we want to talk about possibly starting up reopen the schools, sports. We'll want to discuss anything you have in mind going forward. I don't know where you want to start.
Well, I guess we can start. Do any of you have questions for Mr. Bonsi or Mr. Lipka? Or for the Board of Health in general?
I
Yeah.
have a question, I guess.
Sorry, Tina, then
Oh, I'm
Linda. Sorry.
The cases that you get, how do you get them? Is there some like main reporting line that goes to you from the hospitals? Or like, how do you get the numbers for Clinton?
So what happens when someone gets tested, the results get sent into the state, and they're entered into our individual immune system. The statewide system that tracks all your contacts, and the test or so forth, so on. So once someone gets tested positive, that goes to our nurse. Right? And then from there, the people is notified, police, fire, the school, of the address that the positive test came. It's not, it doesn't happen the next day. Sometimes it's 2, 3, 4, 5 days. Sometimes it's the wrong address, the wrong town. So it's still a work in progress. Right now, there's so many cases, so many contacts. There's been a little bit of a delay on finding. Some people are self-reporting before we get from the state. So there's no perfect science yet.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. So how would you distinguish the difference between someone self-reporting and if that also got counted by the state? Is there a way of duplicating?
We don't count them until the state.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's a great question. Thank you for asking it, and thank you for answering it. I think from what I understand from what you've said is that there's little likelihood of missing a case because a positive test is entered, the lab sends that to the state, which then sends that out to the local boards of health? So, okay, so that's interesting.
And sometimes the reason because it's the wrong address, the wrong town, spelling is off. So there are times where we're not doing a lot of searching here to try to figure this one out, but for the most part, 95% they're happy.
Mrs. Goodsell?
I was just curious as to, are you seeing any common denominator? Is there anything, like is there certain segments, are there certain areas, are there certain groups, or is this just random all over the place? And my second part of the question would be, other than wearing the mask and staying 6 feet apart, is there anything else we should be doing?
As far as what we're seeing, a lot of it's transmitted in the household. I've seen some businesses who have cases, home, daycare, nothing crazy.
Okay.
3, 4, 5 cases. But for the most part, especially now after Thanksgiving, it's been transmitted throughout the household.
Gotcha.
As far as precautions, definitely wearing a mask, staying 6 feet apart, washing, sanitizing your hands, just being smart about this. It's common sense. It's the only advice we can give right now. Vaccine has been released today. I think it'll be months before it's the season here. Go to the hospitals first, the first responders, and it should start trickling down to us probably February, March. Fingers closed. It'll trickle down to us where we can look at, DPW, teachers, police, fire, stuff of that nature. So we're still, I'm going to guess 4 months away, 4 months away. It's going to start to help our cause.
And again, if I may, when you say trickle down to us, you mean sort of the departments in Clinton that are in the, that second or third tier, not necessarily the vaccine coming to Clinton at all.
When it comes to us, we've been told we might get 100 at the same time. So it's going to slow processing first. So that's what we've been told. We know more as time goes on, but right now, it's not going to come overnight.
Any other questions?
I just have a question I have to ask. For specific health data, are you privy to information, like, I think it was 2018, we had a horrific flu season. Are you privy to that information of how many new flu cases there were per day, or is this just something with this pandemic that has been measured, the COVID?
I don't really think they tracked the flu cases in 18 like they did this pandemic. I wouldn't have the information in front of me. We really weren't tracking it. It wasn't going through us, it was going through primary care doctor at the hospital. It really wasn't coming to Board of Health other than administering flu shots.
Okay. So when the decision was made to shut the town offices, is that something that came out of your office?
Yeah, well, spiking cases, the governor stepped back. We decided not to put people at risk if we didn't have to, but the town hall was still open, it's just by appointment only. So we just didn't want to have people roaming the hallways. Down on the first floor where we are, there's a lot of contractors that get out there all day long, doing permits and buying form questions. So now we're encouraging them to do a lot of that stuff over the phone. So we're just trying to limit contact, try to keep town hall offices open. To be available to the public, so you can pay your bills still. So just trying to take the necessary precautions to keep the town hall open, along with all the other town offices.
Two things,
Thank you.
Steve. On the, first on the learning model. So we're in a current, this Remote Plus kind of phase 2, which goes until the 15th of January. And at that point, I know Steve's going to cover all this later, but in case you guys, leave and don't hang around. So the next step for the school committee and for the superintendent more than us is this hybrid, bringing more kids back. And I don't want to go all into it. Steve can cover it. But based on what you're saying now is we should kind of plan about two things, right? Going with the good data, hoping the data gets good and bringing more kids back, but also preparing for going backwards. Is that, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious with the holiday season of this, it's not going to get better. And you've seen that with the we had last week. I think we're in for a long one, in probably the beginning of January. I know you've closed the schools for the most part. Hopefully by the time the 22nd rolls around, we'll be in a much better position. I'd like to see that we're in the yellow. I'm not that optimistic that that's going to happen that soon. It's going to take some time because of the amount of cases that we have now. We've got over 650 for the town right now, probably more. And we're going up probably 8, 9, 10 a day, somebody more. So right now, we're taking the approach to slow things down and kind of close things down and try to isolate and contain this and not spread it throughout the workforce. We encourage you to do the same.
Thanks. I had another question, but I'll wait in case anybody else has one.
Good.
Go ahead. So the next one is on the winter sports, and Smitty's here. And again, I know Smitty's later on in here, but I don't want to ask you a question and you say, geez, I would have get like something for the Board of Health. So two things. So when the Mid-Wachusett and the MIA come out with all their guidance, which they came out with at the beginning of December. Now, when the governor now goes back a step, or if we go back another step, do they call, not the Clinton Board of Health, but do they work through the Board of Health kind of world before the Mid-Wachusett comes out with this? Because what I'm getting at is the governor came out with some guidance. They came out with their sports guides, and then the governor went back a step. So now it looks like the document they have is kind of outdated. So we're trying to determine, whether it's basketball, hockey, whatever the winter sports are, based off a document that kind of might contradict what the governor's new step is, I guess is what I'm getting at. So do they call you guys at all, or is that just something you see when Smitty sees it? Yep.
He makes it following the data, so when he sees a spike, he'll take a step back. With the holiday season, he knows it's going to get worse. So I really anticipate him probably taking another step back. City of Boston just did that today. It's going to get worse before it gets better. We know that. As far as sports, I don't know. It's a tough question because what's the priority? Our goal all along was to try to keep the schools open as long as we could. That's why we kind of pretty strict on the fall sports. That's why we didn't want any teams going into a community that's in the red, nor did we want moving in the red coming to Clinton. So we haven't changed that. We voted on that back in the fall. Board of Health hasn't changed that vote. we're still holding to that. The information we got here about high school sports, it looks like everyone's in the same boat, everyone's in the red. So, I mean, I'm trying to figure out where the board's coming from. When we had 33 cases over 2 weeks, you closed the school for 2 months. Now we're at 130 cases, and we're talking about all sports. What is the school safe? That's what we're here for. That's our goal, is to keep everybody safe, have a safe working environment, a safe place for kids to go, get them out of the house. I mean, we're going to work with you when we can. We've got to be smart about this, and we've got to be reasonable. And I really think we're going to take a step back in the near future. And to rush into something right now, affect us in January, but there's not going to open school, or when we plan on opening school, so.
Yeah, and I think your point is well taken, and just to be clear, we want to keep everyone safe as well. And I think, what we have been able to do, we took a vote in our last meeting to just continue to be included in a pod. That doesn't mean that sports are necessarily going to happen. And, and if the data suggests that it can't, then they can't. But the vote that we took in our last meeting was just so that we would have a spot if we're able to move forward and participate. Whether or not we can do that, remains to be seen. And I share your pessimism. It doesn't look like things are getting better, but I also want to be clear that we've never actually closed schools. We've moved to a remote model, and all of our students are still, learning every day.
I guess what I was getting at, I'm sorry, what I was getting at, Steve, is and I think we're also in the same frustration you guys, you try to come up with your policy or your procedures going forward based off the current guidance from the governor, and then by the time it gets down to in this case, we talk sports, I already covered the learning part, it gets down to the sports and they come up with a policy letter, and then it seems like to go ahead and go forward with it, and like you say, the steps are changing, and I'm not faulting the governor or the mayor down in Boston. They're doing what they have to do, and by the time everybody gets ready to execute the plan, then we've had more test positives, we seem to go back. I think what you hit on there, though, is maybe, again, Smitty, and I'm just asking this, is maybe get with like you did in the fall with I think we only have one home sport this year, right? Well, two, girls and boys basketball, right? The rest are co-op, thank you. Is to get with the Board of Health like we did in the fall and based off of their guidance, hey, if we were to go forward with the tryouts and then in January with the practices or whatnot, how would we hit all that, I don't want to bore with everything, but the number of kids in the gym and disinfecting between groups and keeping them out, how we'd go for that so that everybody here, not just the school committee, but the Board of Health and everybody in the town would feel comfortable if we're able to go forward, that we have a plan rather than we'll work it out. I think, because I know that's what you did in the fall, not just with the school sports, but with the
youth sports.
Youth sports, thank you.
Yep.
So maybe that's the way to go, is to look at the guidance, the current state or phase or step or whatever we're in. How do we follow that guidance and still try to participate in a sport? Because like Lippy said, it is we want all the kids to be safe and to try something and then find out that, that was the cause, or someone tested positive. Not only would it affect the school, but also that sport will be done for the year because we missed a step. Thanks.
I guess I think I'm a little confused. I see that under the Board of Health, we're asking for learning model recommendations and/or winter sports recommendations. Are we looking for recommendations to make a decision based upon what the local Board of Health is saying they feel today? Because I feel like, to Mr. Bailey's point, we've done that. In our packet tonight, there's additional steps we're willing to take to keep the kids safe. We have the governor's EEA that's approved winter sports. We have the MIAA that's approved winter sports. And we've had the Midwalk that's approved winter sports, but under very strict and specific guidelines as to how we can do it if we choose to participate. We have over 300 kids that come to the school every day. They're high-needs kids, but they're here. There's 300 kids in the building. So I guess all I'm asking is, although I share the feeling that potentially there could be some risk to sports, but we're talking about 12 more kids being in the building any given day for any given 90 minutes compared to what it is exactly right now. Albeit in a building that's empty because they're already gone for the day. So what I really don't want us to get caught up in from a school committee perspective is that because we see the numbers rising, that the feeling is that the schools aren't going to have kids in the buildings, because the only kids that are going to lose out here are the sports kids. They're going to lose out because they're not going to be able to play sports, and there's 12 of them on each team. So it's going to be highly confined, under high guidelines, to make sure they do the right thing when the building is basically empty, until games start late January. If the government already has that in play, why would we as a town want to supersede what the state of Massachusetts is saying? If we roll back like we say, then the rollback's going to impact us anyway. We don't really need to make that decision locally. Every other town in our pod has approval from their Board of Health and from their school committees to participate in winter sports. So I just feel like, you know, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, and I'm not saying we'll even get through a season, because there's a lot to be determined between here and the end. But I don't see I guess I'm looking for some more guidance around where we think the danger is with 12 kids being in a gym that's 25,000 square feet compared to the 10 kids a day that sit in a classroom every single day in the classroom when they come here every day.
Well, and I guess I would add to that too, that if the data is telling us that the rise in cases seem to be at family gatherings, I think that mitigates the concern about continuing to phase in schools. Now, again, and let me be very, very clear, we are incredibly grateful for our partnership with the Board of Health. I don't know where we would be right now without them. But you know, if the data that we have that comes from the labs, that goes to the state, that comes to our Board of Health, that's shared with us, is suggesting that the spread is not happening here, then and I know that we have a sports update coming up, we have other updates coming up as well, but I think there's a bit of an inconsistency unless you know, this data continues to spike beyond reasonable abilities to be able to not only staff the schools, but have, you know, end up with this, you know, situation where we have to be constantly quarantining the students that we are able to bring back. It becomes an untenable situation at that point. And I do think that athletics are sort of a sub-tier behind that, because, you know, we need to continue to be focused on keeping our students, keeping our faculty, and our community as safe as we possibly can under the circumstances.
Joel?
Yes.
I would just like to say right here, I'm kind of taken aback just the fact that we're even having this conversation. Like Mr. Lifka said, we went to Remote Plus because we all cared so much about the kids and what the kids needed, what the kids this, so we can go back in the notes. And yet we close it down at 30 plus, and yet we're hitting the hundreds, and we're going to be, let's play basketball. I mean, if we're putting 12 more kids in the school, I'd rather put 12 more kids that have special needs, have high needs. If we're going to bring more people into the building, I'd rather it be students who actually need the help than a sport. And I just am voicing my opinion right now that I think this is just, again, a ridiculous conversation we're having, that sports would take precedence over health and education.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't. I'm sorry, but that's a false statement. We wouldn't. Hold on. We wouldn't not bring students in to learn because of sports. We would. It's not one or the other. It's not one or the other at all.
We could bring more kids in if we can bring all these sports kids in.
We still can do that. The sports is after school. There's nobody in the building at that point in time. That's all I'm saying.
But you're also touching. We have to wear masks. We have to wash our hands. We can't touch things.
You do.
But we're all going to touch a basketball together.
Well,
Okay, Steve, I guess what I'm asking is, are we gaining guidance from the local Department of Health tonight to say shut down school sports? Or are we managing this as a school committee to continue what we voted on last week, to realize that we have to take the data as it comes, we have to be careful, we have to be thoughtful, and we are still planning to participate as long as we can do those things? And if it's proven that we cannot, are we saying we shouldn't do it? I guess I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, so
where we are.
I guess I would say, you know, we've had a lot of conversations and different meetings about where this is, and I do think the priority needs to be on trying to get kids back in school, right?
Absolutely.
And there's no doubt, I don't think anyone would argue that. You know, we're going to talk about our plan later tonight of trying to kind of go back into that sort of hybrid model that we're hoping we can start on January 19th, right? Just like we said, that's, you know, I know we say the data's not good, we don't know what's going to happen, it could get worse, but that is more than a month away, right? So you're talking almost like 5 weeks from now is when you would be talking about that. So who knows what could happen between now and January 19th, but we need to have a plan to reopen schools. So we're going to try to go move forward with our plan to try to get that logistically worked out. I think at the same time, if we're moving forward in that vein, you know, I do think, kind of like we did last time, I think keeping the thought of winter sports alive is good, but I think we need to make sure it's the same idea, that we're going to do it if it's possible. I know that, you know, one of the things I think that Mr. Smith was able to kind of get our season pushed back a little bit so that we would have a bye week the first week of the season. And what that does is that times up that there would be no competitions between Clinton and any other school until we were in that week where schools were back open. It would time it up so the earliest our first competition could be, I think, was the 19th or 18th or 19th, the same week that we would reopen. Yeah. And then what we could do is we could have, you know, if we started practices maybe when we came back, then we could still get our teams 2 weeks of practice in so they could participate. And I think all that is then, but that gives us some time to see what happens between now and then, right? Because to everyone's point here, if the state rolls back tomorrow and they say one of the things that they're shutting down is youth sports, then it's a moot point, right? But if they're not, and if for some reason things are promising, right? Let's say, hey, the vaccine is having more of a positive impact than they thought, or people were smarter during Christmas and didn't seem to travel as much during Thanksgiving and we didn't quite see the same spike, or whatever it is, we don't know.
Right.
We're predicting, and so far most of our predictions have seemed to be correct, but you never know, right? People might smarten up, and then what we could do is, you know, if we see that plateau or we see a dip in the data, if our percent positivity drops down and we end up going back to yellow, I mean, things can change fast, right? We saw that in November when all of a sudden with the new guidance we went right to yellow again, right? So, you know, I think it's worth trying to keep hope alive for the winter sports season, and I think that you know, maybe looking at something. I know we get out kind of early because we move those days. I don't know if we want to maybe push practices off until we're done with school this week.
Sure.
And then maybe let the basketball teams have a couple days for the tryouts where there is no staff and students in the building when we're on that holiday break. So really they are the only ones in. It's not a question of if they're taking the spots of the student. And then maybe what we could do is, I believe the Board of Health has a meeting. You guys are meeting January 4th? You're meeting January 4th. We could post, I have on here if we wanted to have a remote, you know, one of those remote meetings if we needed to, January 4th in the evening, in case there's any updates or changes. And maybe we could vote to say, you know, go ahead and you know, maybe to resume practices on January 5th pending the January 4th meeting. I think they're only allowed 5 practices in a week anyway, so if they're allowed to go forward, they'd be able to get their 5 practices in that week. So, you know, I know it still keeps kind of seeming like, you know, we're pushing it off and we're pushing it off, and maybe we're just delaying the inevitable, but maybe we're not. And if for some reason we do get more of a positive turn, then I think we want to be able to offer our kids the best opportunity we can academically and for, any other activities that we can get them going in. And when we say other activities, we do have, we did appoint the high school drama advisors. They're going to be working on it's more of a remote production, but they'll be working on a production. And we just got a revised proposal from our middle school drama about a proposal, the production they might try to put on later in the spring, so that hopefully it can be done outside with everybody, but more in person, but outside. So it's not, it's not just athletics. I think it's a matter of right now trying to just engage kids. If we have that opportunity and we can engage kids, I think any way we can do it is important. This is a tough time for everybody. But obviously we need to be somewhat, we need to be smart about it. And if we'll see where the state is, where we are. The thing is, I think what's changed now is we're not, our numbers are still pretty high, but we're not alone anymore.
Yeah.
Remember when this first started, we were like one dot of red surrounded by, green and then a little more red up to the top. It's a whole block of red right now where we are. So, I think that if cases continue to rise, you're probably going to see something that's more sort of a pod-wide decision to say, we're all going to take a pause in the season, or we're all going to do something like that. And I think, like I said, from an academic standpoint, we'll talk more a little bit about the hybrid plus model, but we're hoping that, that's a model that we can roll into that will allow us to continue to keep phasing kids in as safely as we can to just keep coming back based on the data as we go through the spring. So I guess that's my take. I don't know how that, I know we've talked a little bit about some of those things, Steve. I don't know if that sounds okay to the board to try proceed that way.
So,
Hold on.
Yeah.
The question was asked to him.
So what you're saying is you're looking for a couple of days next week when no one's in the schools for tryouts or to evaluate your teams and go to practice before the school break?
Right, because we have those 3 days or 2 or 3 days there, the 20, that where we
21st,
moved,
2nd, and 3rd.
we moved, they were originally school days, we moved those to June. So those are days that there'll be custodians in the building, there'll be the administrators, people will be in the building, so the building will be open, but we won't have students or teachers in the building. So it would be an opportunity for them to do the tryouts, sort of organize their teams, maybe get them a playbook, set up a Google Meets to go over things if they want to. And then there's a recommended cooling off period, I know in the handbook anyway. I think we just sort of enforce that, and we can reevaluate that on January 4th to see if we're comfortable moving forward, starting on the 5th with practices or not.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
Mr. Bailey, do you want to follow?
Yeah, Steve kind of answered part of it there, but what I'd like, again, from the Board of Health, and I'll echo Joel's statement. Obviously, I see you guys every day, so I got to tell you, publicly, you're doing a great job. But, for going forward here, as you kind of alluded to, we just see Boston going back in phases. They start looking like 1 minute we're in a phase, then we're just a step in it. If it would be all right rather than you got 5 school committee members here, we shouldn't be contacting you or bothering you about sports. We got our athletic director. It'd be all right for him to work with you guys. So as you see a change, hey Smitty, you can just give him a call. Hey, listen, the number of kids you can have in the basketball has gone from 10 to 8 or whatever, that he can then work with the coaches and get that word out to them so that they can figure out how they're going to enforce this. And with the same thing, Smitty, we've got kids playing hockey with Neshoba and gymnastics with Hudson. Is if you could just kind of get with their AD and find out, just so you can let our Board of Health feel comfortable that these students that we have are going elsewhere to play a sport, that the guidelines that they're following, so that these guys, if there's an outbreak in Lancaster, that they can reach out and know who to reach out to do any kind of contact should that somebody being affected been part of the hockey program, so that we're not, I know we kind of focus on the basketball because they're in-house here, but we still have kids that, like Lippy said, you get, I don't know, Neshoba's schedule or Hudson's gymnastics schedule, that we can kind of track and see where they're playing or competing, so that, if something happens, we know, these guys can know who to contact. These 5 kids, hockey players, just don't kind of fall through the ground because we didn't know about it. But I do say, and you know, I agree with these guys, with the Board of Health and with Steve's recommendation. If we could just get a couple days from you guys, and I know you already said, yeah, you know, just to do the tryouts, to figure out who they got to, you know, who's going to play varsity and who's going to, you know, play JV, and then, you know, sit still like the MIA recommended, and then on the 4th, when, you know, if things are looking good. And to Deb's point, if, like, Smitty, first of all, thank you for getting it pushed off to the 18th, because if it matches up with us offering to open the building, it's no different than under normal circumstances. You know, if this was a normal year, the football and the fall sports actually start about a week or 10 days before school opens. So, you know, if our games start the same day that we're offering to open the building under the new hybrid, you know, everybody has the same opportunity, whether it's to play a sport or to come, you know, just come to school and hang out with their friends. So I like that, you know, that we can marry up the two dates.
Yeah, and I agree with you guys, and I hope it, to be clear, I want people to understand my position. My position is consistency, and the state puts out guidelines for all kinds of things, like rollbacks on when indoor dining is no longer something we can do because it's not safe. So the state puts guidelines together and gives guidance for lots of things that are outside of school. So we take that guidance, we run with it. All the work that's been put in the packet to be safe, no different than when you go into a restaurant, there's certain ways you can eat, there's certain ways you can't, because it's safe or it's not safe. The only thing I don't want to see us do is to make an arbitrary decision based upon feelings of what may or may not be safe for kids that have to do with extracurricular activities, whatever they are, because we think it's going to support someone being safer. If the government rolls back that we can't do indoor dining, then clearly we probably, maybe we shouldn't be playing sports. But if 25 people can gather in a restaurant to eat and have a meal, it seems a little bit crazy to me that we can't have 12 kids in a gym that's 3 times the size of a restaurant with masks on participating in exercise.
So we have,
That's all.
thank you.
Consistency. And I'm not saying it's safe. I think we should do whatever's best interest of everybody being safe.
And we have procedures. We've looked at the procedures. We took the vote to at least provide an opportunity for us to be included. I agree with Dr. Meyer. I think, you know, we will continue, and to actually all of your points, that we will continue to look at, you know, what the data is telling us, what the Board of Health is telling us, and unless there are objections, I'll close the public comment at this point. And
Well, that was the agenda item
we
with the
can-
Clinton Board of Health. I do have a couple public comments that I can read after.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know there were. Additional.
That's all right. They're listed as 2 separate things, so we can, you know, whenever we're.
Could I just ask one more question?
Of course.
Board of Health? Sure. So I know we've changed, back in October, I know we had a school committee meeting. I don't remember the exact dates, but there was a spike in the schools where we had a couple of cases, and I guess we decided to go remote for that week, maybe.
Yep.
And I remember getting home that night and turning the news on and watching Governor Baker at a press conference that afternoon that I hadn't seen before the meeting say, oh, well, you know, schools are safe, our kids should really be in schools. So I'm like irritated at the mixed messages that I'm getting from our state, but, and then of course, a couple weeks later, where they totally changed the numbers and we were in the red, making decisions because we were in the red, but then all of a sudden our numbers are higher, but we're not red anymore, we're yellow. So I get it now, you know, we've been red consistently for the past, you know, however many weeks. But I guess my question would be is what number are we looking at? Like what number do we need to get at to get back into the yellow? Or for the Board of Health to recommend, say, that the town office is open again? Is it a number that you're looking to get at?
What the government does is comes up with guidance, and it's general guidance for all 351 communities. From there, the health departments base their actions on the numbers, cases that they have, positive cases. So you're right, the government does have guidance, but it's different for every town. Boston is going to be a lot different than Elton Berkshire, so those cases are that way. So they are pretty popular with schools. So that's where he drops in and out of decision. So we follow the guidance. And what we do is base it on the number of weeks that we're in the red. We're probably, there was going to be 8 out of the last weeks. So he changed the guidance. It was 15 cases over 2 weeks. And then he was going to, I'm not sure, I think it was 25. and into the middle. In my opinion. Probably going to be at least a month. It's going to have to get through the holidays, it's going to have to get through Christmas and New Year's, and hopefully then, start working its way down and get us into it. And then all this is, the precautions we're taking is what's going to help get us there.
Right, right. I mean, I'd like to think we were a little ahead of the curve in the proactive of closing the schools before anybody said they should be closed, or, in anticipation of this big holiday rush, and now we're going into Christmas. So are you saying that if the schools weren't closed right now, you would probably be recommending that they were closed, or remote, I should say?
So I hate to say, or I hate to be an armchair quarterback, I think we made a decision to close, we did. Superintendent does a great job of contact tracing and notifying us and checking addresses, and so do superintendent, principals and vice principals. They know who the kids hang around with. They were on top of their game, and they notified us, and we had people quarantining at home, working with our nurses and school nurses. I mean, I think they did an outstanding job. I think we met at close just a couple of weeks early. But this is a learning curve for all of us.
Sure,
We're
yeah.
all learning on the fly, we're doing the best we can, and our goal is to be safe, and that's all we want, and that's all we're striving for. But our goal is to keep the schools open, so a lot of the things that we're doing on the side, with closing the town halls, and going back, and limiting the amount of tables in restaurants, our goal is just that, to keep the school open, and that's what it's all about. Kids back at school, and playing sports, and the drama club, and what goes along with being a kid. So that's where we are. That's what's important to us, and we're here to work with you, not against you. We just want to be smart, and we want to be on the same page.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I just want to thank you guys for coming tonight.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know
Thank
we
you
talk.
very much.
I get my daily texts from Tom, and I know I probably get my daily call from Steve. But I appreciate I appreciate you guys coming, and I think, like I said, it's just the more we can get all on the same page, so that we're making sure that our decisions are in the best interest of everyone, I think is the best way to go.
We appreciate your time, gentlemen. Thank you so much for all of your hard work.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so I did
Sorry,
have
I'm sorry I missed that part of the agenda where it was all blended together. So is there public comment, I guess is my question.
Well, Dave, could you do me a favor? Could you go to the camera there and hit the little button to rotate, because for some reason we all flipped upside down. So two public comment things. One was just a question, said how many people will be in each building if the school committee decides to do hybrid plus. I don't have the exact numbers of that right in front of me, but I do know that it would be probably less than our original hybrid model, because our original hybrid, oh, not that camera, sorry. Yeah, that one, yep. Just that little rotate button there. So the original numbers we had, just about 20% of our students, maybe a little under 20%, opted for remote. So right now, you can do it right on the camera, Dave, right up on the thing. There's a little, on the little stem going up there, there's a rotate button. I think it's down more. I think it's on where the buttons are. On the, like, look at the stand.
Talk about the, this camera.
Yeah,
Sorry, my bad. Like that.
perfect. We're flipped over again. Thank you. All right. So so how many people would be back in the building? So it would be less than under the hybrid that we opened in the beginning of the year, because right now our current survey data shows that our students who are opting for hybrid have climbed up to 35%. So there'd be an additional 15% of the students that would not be coming in at most, and I think our goal would try to be, or at a minimum, I think. So I think we would try to, look and balance those numbers off there. I know that the survey just closed on Friday. We've been trying to look at the preliminary data, and now we're starting to kind of go more for class lists, grade by grade, those types of things. So I don't have the exact numbers on it, but that's kind of what we're looking at.
Sorry, you meant that it's up to about 35% looking for fully remote.
Correct, sorry, did I say the wrong thing? Sorry. So it was about 20%, the number has climbed to 35, yep. There was there was public comment by Tom Flanagan, parent, taxpayer, North Clinton. Says, shows the science and data that proves athletics has contributed to the spread. I have a couple hours. It's the gatherings associated with sports that cannot happen. If you kick the can any longer on sports, it's too late. Don't give the kids false hope. Then there's kind of some back and forth that I don't think is necessary to read. And Tom had one more. It just says it's imperative for the student athletes lucky enough to play follow strict adherence to social distancing away from their sport. Mr. Lipko is correct. I believe the in-house spread is fueling the surge. Kids, you know, if there's a team dinner at Billy's house, there's a possibility of spread and everyone's season is over. Thanks for considering ideas and giving this a chance. So I think, besides that, there was just a little exchange about someone saying, isn't basketball a contact sport? And someone said, no, it's not. It's under the definition of a contact sport. It was just kind of, that's the part I kind of skipped over.
So are the, again, I want to praise Mr. Smith and the department for the extensive guidelines which help to sway me. Are those public? Did we put those on the website?
The guidelines, I don't know. Yep.
I sent everything out, and we linked it up to a public letter to every parent's email, every kid's email address, and it's on the website.
Yeah. I think it's helpful to sort of dispel the notion that it would just be a business as usual kind of thing. They've made dramatic procedural elements that they've built into if these things can happen. So,
And unlike the fall outside where there was limited spectators, there would be no spectators
right.
in anything.
Well, and I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot there. So I would encourage people to take a look at those online.
Sure.
And I thank people online for their comments. Go ahead.
Can they hear me, or do you have to type it in, or?
No, they can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to Tom Flanagan, I just wanted to clarify, and I think Steve alluded to it earlier when the Board of Health was here, it's not that we're giving them false hope. What we're doing is we're being honest with the students and honest with the parents, that we hope, and I'm speaking, you know, based off of what we just met with the Board of Health and the members of this board, we hope, and we're trying our darndest to have sports in the winter, and all sports and all after-school activities, drama and so forth, but we don't want to give them false hope. We don't want to tell them, hey, you know what, or make it sound hopeless. Right now, we're doing everything we can based off the numbers, and it's not just us. Look at the businesses. 1 minute they're open, 1 minute, you know, everybody's doing on this board, and the superintendent, his administration, and his staff, doing everything they can to get them going forward. So if it means, like we haven't opted out. We've said, hey, listen, Smitty, tell them we're in, because we hope to be in. Because if we opt out, we can't go back in. So we're telling them we're in.
Right.
You know, so that we can do everything that this board can. If it means a couple tryouts, so they can rack and stack the players, and then hopefully on the 4th they get to practice. Smitty got it, so we'll play a week later. So we're doing everything we can not to eliminate it. So it isn't a false hope. It's being honest. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. We'll close public comment at this time.
Thanks, Jim.
Dr. Meyer.
All right, thank you. So moving on to the superintendent report, we'll be coming back to a lot of these topics, but first thing of business, we did receive an official letter. Sue Giroux has informed us that after 32 years of teaching for Clinton Public Schools, she's made the decision to retire on January 29th, 2021. So she's going to be doing a mid-year retirement, and you know, we wish her the best. And I know this has been a tough year for her, but I think that you know, I think she's you know, she'll be missed. She's brought a lot to Clinton, and you know, we wish her all the best. The next thing I want to talk about is sort of our reopening plan, reopening updates. So I kind of put these, the backup is a little bit different than the agenda. So the first year, if you look at the page in here after the data, I don't know if we need to go over the data. I know we kind of mentioned all the cases. You can see the graph. But I put a little chronology of the school year down. So you remember we started with the professional development. We had 11 days of that. We talked about COVID-19 safety and guidance, the technology, social emotional learning. And we actually held reopening meetings with each student and family to kind of make sure that we could identify, all the students. And I think that's huge. I think, if you watch the news, there was some reports of, school districts that still had hundreds of kids that they hadn't had logged on and hadn't had connection with. And we were able to get pretty much every single kid in the door during that time to just at least check on them and get them the technology. That led to hybrid learning, which we opened on September 16th. All students who elected to attend school were able to do so. Teachers were able to form relationships. Staff could check on the well-being of students. That was our main priority. I'd say we definitely tried to prioritize making a safe in-person learning experience. Back then we had 18% actually was the remote learners. So that's that number if you want to compare it. It was 18% on October 5th, and it would be 35% now, so almost double. But I think the big lesson learned from hybrid learning in the beginning was that asynchronous week, right? Because while we focused really on trying to conduct in-person learning safely, and we tried to rely more on sort of curriculum and software for the asynchronous week, what we found is there just wasn't enough support for students. There wasn't enough regular support for students. There wasn't enough structure for students during that week, and it became very, very difficult. And what it became was, because the cohorts were kind of so independent, teachers, I think, got to a point where they were having difficulties because they were, you're juggling the green cohort, the gold cohort, the full in-person cohort. Some might even had some kids that were trying to be full remote, or you end up with the cohort that we kind of overlooked that was growing was the quarantine student cohort, the ones that kind of had to quarantine for 14 days at that point and missed their in-person week. And how do you handle them? So then we moved into remote learning. I think the positive of that was all students were able to engage with their classes at the same time through Google Meets. So it was a lot more structured. It started suddenly as a pause because we had to investigate possible in-school transmission. We worked with the DPH epidemiologist to review the cases and try to rule out in-person transmission in the classroom. Additionally, under the old guidance, Clinton was projected for its third week in the red, which would have required us to go to remote learning if we remember back under the old guidance. However, the guidance was changed on, I think, like Tuesday or Thursday or whatever. They delayed the data, and then they came out with the new system. So the lesson learned, though, was while this was a good time to regroup, and that most people found that the structure of the remote learning obviously was much better than the structure that they got on the asynchronous week during the hybrid, not all students, and particularly students with high needs, were not able to effectively engage in remote learning. So then we entered Remote Plus. We did that. We're in the middle of that. Phase 1, we brought in 237 students at this point, or at that point. We had invited 335. We started Phase 2 last week on December 9th. We had additional 106 students were invited, 67 attended. So we've invited 441 kids back to school, and 304 of them have said yes and are here. So lessons learned. So what did we do? We tried to use this time to survey families about their preferred learning model for their students. That was something else that happened as the cases started going and we started having some positive student cases in school. That's where we could start to see families starting to request. They no longer wanted to be hybrid, they wanted to be remote, and it was another challenge or stress on the original hybrid model. We also realized that there needs to be some special consideration in the next phase for early childhood students and possibly students who are working towards graduation. We know seniors we're working on a tight deadline with. We also know that, remote learning when you're in kindergarten or remote learning when you're in first grade is extremely difficult because you're learning how to read, right? Like you're not a reader, you're learning how to read, which means it's really not effective unless you have an adult who's able to sit with you essentially the whole time, making sure you're on pace. One other thing we said was this model operated on a shortened in-person day that eliminated the need for serving food at school, and also provided opportunities for staff to focus just on remote learning in the afternoon. So I think that was a big one too. I think, what we're hearing is, you're seeing it with some of the restaurant stuff, and you're hearing it about the family gatherings. The biggest risk is, I'd say for everything that we're doing with hand sanitizer and everything we're doing with spraying rooms and trying to clean and do it, that's all great. But I think what we're really what we're learning and what we've learned over the last few months with this virus is it's basically spread through the air. So when you have those opportunities when you have those times when people are not wearing masks, like during a lunch session, that's probably the greatest risk we have. And even if we have people 6 feet away, it's 25 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever their lunch is for without their mask on, eating food. So that was a significant risk that we figured by shortening the day, giving the grab-and-go meals, we're still giving the food. It took one risk out of the day, and it also, like I said, it freed up teachers to then have time that they could engage everyone remotely. So what are we proposing right now? So right now, the way it stands, we're looking at trying to go to a hybrid plus. The goal of this model would get to all students to return in at least a hybrid format. So essentially, what we would want to do is basically follow the same remote plus schedule that we're following now. The shortened day, no lunches, we do the grab and go, no students in the building in the afternoon, so teachers can provide remote support to all students, whether they're in school or not. We would want to keep everyone who is attending both days right now, could still attend both days. And then we'll go from there. One of the ideas is also to try to make it so that teachers, so example at the high school or the middle school, you might have teachers, so like at the beginning of the period, have them engage the entire class remotely to kind of go over, take attendance, go over the objective for the day, make sure they outline kind of like what the learning assignment or expectations is, maybe even review a key concept or two, and then they might let the kids who are home sort of sign off and do their work, but they've had that check-in for 15, 20 minutes of that period, so they at least know what they're supposed to be doing, and the whole class knows what they're supposed to be doing. So that's the kind of the vision of this, is that we kind of sort of continue what we're doing, but we just start bringing more kids back in. We start with the green and gold. I would say one thing is that at the elementary school, we are going to look, part of what they're doing right now, I know that the administration down there had a meeting today, but what they're looking at right now is particularly the requests, like the kid-by-kid requests for like kindergarten. Who said they want to be remote? Who said they want to be in person? Because what we're trying to look at is, if we have the staffing and the space capacity to try to bring like kindergartners in every day, or potentially even first graders in every day. So we'll see, but I mean that's going to be dependent on the numbers, of the survey. So we're not sure if we can do that yet. Working on it, but I think everything else we could do it in that hybrid plus model. A couple considerations moving forward. The DESE plans to release guidance on what's considered what they're calling a live student learning time on December 15th. So they're going to have two sort of components you need to make. One component is they want you to have live check-ins with every student every day, which doesn't have to be like a check-in. It could be live, like at least a live class with every kid every day. And they also want to have minimum hours. So if you're in a hybrid model, the proposal tomorrow for the Board of Education is 35 hours over a 2-week period. You should at least be, if you're in hybrid, should be live, meaning either synchronous online or in person. If you're fully remote, that number goes up to 40. They want it to be more if you're fully remote. We did get feedback from the state on our original hybrid model because we had to enter those timelines and see what they said. When they reviewed our original hybrid model, obviously we didn't have a guaranteed check-in with every student every day, so we didn't meet that criteria. And the other criteria, when you added up our minutes in certain grade levels, we were like 18 minutes short a day or something like that. So, to be clear, these guidance lines didn't exist, and they still don't exist. They're trying to get them out, trying to pass them tomorrow. And actually, coincidentally, the state is asking for people to make necessary adjustments to comply with them by January 19th. So, right when we would hopefully enter the next phase. I would say, though, that based on those guidelines, I do think our current Remote Plus model does satisfy the remote categories, but we need to look at the hybrid model. The Board of Health brought it up a little bit, but educators have been identified as part of Group 2 for the vaccine distribution. So, they talked about that they're going to prioritize K-12 educators, and they did. So, they're looking at potentially as early as February for that. And I think that would be huge if we could get, we're not seeing, and obviously it's all, you never know, right? But we're not seeing, most of the students, if we find out that they're infected, they almost don't even know, right? It's like they were a close contact, maybe they had a fever one day, they got tested, and by the end of the 10 days, they were fine, right? Like I don't think we had one student in the beginning when we were doing this that was really kind of an extended, like, this won't go away. I think all along the concern has been more for a lot further staff who, potentially have different risk levels than many of our students. So I think that having the ability to get staff vaccinated in a timely manner hopefully should help with that. One of the things that they talked about this morning in our department chair meeting, the town departments, was I'll probably try to put this together before Christmas, but just trying to do a preliminary interest survey with the staff of basically, if you were offered to take the vaccine, do you plan on taking it? Because that way we're trying to just get those numbers so that when they ask how many we need to distribute, we're able to get that. I know some of the first responders, I know the police chief said this morning that they were contacted directly by like the Office of Public Safety or something like that to give them their numbers of like how many people do you have, who's going to take the vaccine, because I think they're just trying to get those numbers to see, based on who's going to get it, how far can we stretch the doses that we have. I think as we go through, if we can get into that, if we can try the Hybrid Plus model, hopefully we would be able to get, Hybrid Plus, if we get that going on January 19th, I think we'd start with a Gold week, because I believe Gold was a couple days behind Green. And there's really only 4 weeks. There's 4 weeks there between that and February break. So you'd be able to go kind of, get each one in twice. Then we're getting into, before you know it, it would be March. And as the weather begins to improve and outside space becomes usable, I think that's when we would start looking to adjustments to the length of the day, and then maybe the number of in-person learners, because obviously once we can start using outside space a little bit more. I remember you guys probably all saw in the beginning of the year when we had like the seats set up outside and kids were eating lunch outside and all those types of things. So hopefully if like the numbers are coming down, the weather's getting better, we can just continue to sort of expand our in-person learning opportunities and length. And if everything, we need to have a continued monitoring of the town COVID-19 data. I think you need to have a plan. And I think we need to have a plan that looks to get every student an opportunity to come to school. If that plan has to get delayed, it has to get delayed. But, we're 4 weeks away right now, at least, maybe a little more than that, close to 5. And, I think that, we saw the spike after Thanksgiving we expected, and we just got to see how that plays out over Christmas, if that'll be any better or not. So that's kind of sort of my update. The next page just had a snapshot in here. You have it from December 11th, because that's when I put it together. On December 11th, there was, you can see that the first page represented 1,174 responses. At that point, 65.3 of the families responded, yes, they want their student in school as much as possible. 21.7 said maybe after April vacation, but not right now. So I think those are people that were thinking, you know, we want to be able to accommodate them in as remote learners now, but we want to make sure we're building the ability to hopefully bring them back. And about 12.9% basically said they want their student as a remote learner basically for the rest of the year. How do those numbers change now? That question ended with, when we closed it, we had 1,397 responses, virtually the same. It dropped a little bit for in-person learning down to 64.6, and the remote learning was the one that really changed. It went up to 14.1. So, but right about that 65. I mean, that's, if we're rounding, it'd be 65 either way. The other one was about the, you know, what if we had to come back hybrid? And I think you still have, you know, you still have the remote, you still have, you have people who say they'd prefer to be full-time remote rather than hybrid. You got some that say maybe you'd want more information on what the support would be, but that in-person doesn't drop much. I mean, it went from 65 down to 61, and if you count some of the maybes, that gets us up to about 79%, something like that, of people who would probably give it a shot. So I think that's, right now, that's the model that I would say we're trying to pursue and work out the kinks and work with our staff and try to get some feedback and try to make sure that we can put some clear parameters and expectations on it so that we can communicate that going forward. Just a couple other quick reopening updates. On December 7th, they came out with this update for MCAS and access testing. So if you might remember, I said that, you know, last meeting when January we were going to have to bring the juniors in and we were going to have to do testing, and the high school was working diligently on a schedule and they had all this plans and they were ready to roll out with a letter. And then on December 7th, the state changed their mind. So now juniors do not need to take the MCAS, at least right now. They're not going to participate during the January, February window. So they're postponing it to later in the year. Students in grade 12, which we have a small number of, will still participate in the test. And then the access test for English language learners, they've extended that. Typically, it's sort of a shorter window. They've given us basically a window all the way through May 20th to make sure that that testing is done, just to help facilitate scheduling. And then I guess the last thing I really, one more note on testing that I just want to share is we'll get more information on this coming from the high school too, but I think at this point the high school is planning on not issuing, not doing midterms the way that they've typically counted midterms on the GPA. They're looking to eliminate that and still do sort of like a benchmark assessment, but using it more for, you know, to measure student learning and try to plan appropriately, rather than having it be sort of a high stakes exam given the, you know, wide variation in resources that some students might have had over the last couple months. We don't want to unnecessarily penalize students with a high stakes exam there. So
Steve, do the AP tests still happen even if MCAS don't? Like, so the students we have that are in AP classes, do those AP tests still happen, or are those
It
not?
should, yeah. So this is all for the window in January. So what happened is these juniors missed the test last year as sophomores. So what they were trying to do is get them tested in January. What they've done now is they've pushed it off. So I'm guessing what we're going to end up having to do now is sometime in the spring for the MCAS, they're going to have us test the current sophomores and the juniors. The AP tests usually start the first or second week of May. And I think last year they did a lot of them online. So I think that they'll be able to still have that testing by May. Yep. The last thing sort of under reopening updates, I did just share with you sort of, this is a letter to Governor Baker that was written by the MASC and the MASS. It was co-authored. And just talking about, you know, kind of recognizing that this is a challenge and that, you know, you have critics on both sides and, but, you know, sort of expressing some of the frustration about the fact that, you know, the governor keeps trying to talk about schools should be open and we should be open to full in-person learning and we should have, and at the same time, we do have kind of some other limits that are put in place by the state's own guidance, right? So things like spacing in classrooms and those types of things are things that, you know, physically, you know, we don't have the infrastructure to do some of those things with all of our students at once, which will be a challenge as we go forward in the middle school, which is why I think really we'll have to look, you know, before we can hope to get all middle school students back, we're probably going to need the weather to turn a little bit so we have some other options for spaces. So that's just, you know, I just wanted to share that with you because it was co-authored by the MASC. I wasn't sure if you had seen that yet. So that's sort of the, you know, that my recommendation is basically that we try to pursue this hybrid plus model that we're still crafting on January 19th. So I don't know if you guys are, you know, if you want to make some sort of, if you want to make a motion to kind of endorse that at this point, that's fine. You could also obviously approve the caveat that it's pending, you know, pending the consideration of local data. But the, or if you're not comfortable with that at this time and you want to wait till you get a more specific schedule or something like that, I could get that to you. So I don't know what your...
Well, so let's see if there's interest in a motion, and then we can discuss it if there is. So would someone like to make a motion to direct the superintendent to move forward with the hybrid plus model, all things considered and all due respect to the data as it continues to unfold?
I'll make that motion.
Motion
Is that
having been made?
For January 19th or January?
Yeah,
Hybrid
yes.
Plus? Yes, I'll second that.
Yep. Okay, any discussion?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So we shortened the day for the remote plus.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure the parents are under the impression that we're going back to the hybrid model on January 19th. I just want to make sure that, have we communicated the shorter day so that they can arrange for
So
day-
technically, we're not going back to the hybrid model, we're moving into a hybrid plus.
Different, we kind of, yeah,
a different one? I just want to
yeah.
make sure, as
Yeah,
a parent, I would think I would need to know if my child is being dropped
Right.
off from the bus sooner. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like,
So I think that's part of the messaging we'll do now as we kind of finalize this, but I do think that part of what we'll see is that, part of what's nice about this is the sort of the structure that the students have had at home, like the schedule that they've been on, if they've been logging on, if you're an 8th grader and you've been logging on for a class at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever your schedule is, that same structure would basically stay in place, right? So what they've been doing right now would kind of be the same sort of routine to an extent. We're going to tighten up the afternoon. We've got to get more of those student learning towers, so we'll probably have the afternoon be, right now the afternoon is kind of still used for more like extra help and tiered support and those types of things. That's probably going to switch to more, you know, full remote synchronous classroom time in the afternoon. But for the most part, it would be very similar to that. But you're right, I think part of what we need to make sure is people understand is that when we're talking about everyone has the opportunity to come back to school, well, what that means is from, you know, if you're from grades 7 to 12, you're coming from 8 to noon. And if you're in grades, you know, 5 and 6, it's 8:30 to 12:30 or what, you know, so we'll make sure we get those times out as we get this going. But I think, you know, I think it's just important that we offer. I know it's not ideal, and I know, but I guess if your option was to stay at home with your kid all day or have your kid at least go in for 4 hours, at least it's 4 hours. So, you know, hopefully that's better.
Steve, are we seeing anything in the numbers from a survey perspective that as this more surveys come in, that could actually change our decision based upon, I guess my thought is if the folks that want to stay remote decide to stay remote and the number that number climbs, then there could be potential where actually the folks that want their kids to come to school, we may actually be able to participate in a different way because we could accommodate them as if they were coming to school full time.
Yeah,
Because the
so-
capacity is different. Is that a potential, or do we not think at this point in time, based upon what we've seen come back, it's not likely that that'll climb to those levels? Because I could see that as potentially happening if the
Yeah.
data results were different.
So I would say, I think each building has its own unique challenges with that. I think it's less likely that you would see that happen at the middle school, where we do still have sort of space challenges, right? However, I do think that's something that we are looking at very seriously at the younger grades, particularly, like I say, K and 1, to try to say, if we literally drill down and we go class by class, kid by kid, is there a way of, even if we have to try to tweak a couple schedules or flip a section or something like that, is there a way to get all the kids in? Kindergarten's also sort of a place that we can try to look to start with that, because we also do have more staffing at the kindergarten level, because every classroom has an IA. So there might even be opportunities to do things where, if you're running stations, one of the stations could be in the cafeteria and it's kind of supported by the IA or something like that. So that, you kind of break up the room a little bit. So we're looking at all those things. But yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of our goal, is to hopefully, as we look at things, try to bring back as many kids as we can. And I guess to your point, if more people said, no, I really want to stay remote, if the numbers go up and as we get closer to the day, they say, I want to be remote, and we're down to only 40% of the kids want to be in school, then they can probably come every day, So I think those are the things that we'll have to look at. I'd almost, just like anything, I think that this is, about the only constant of this year is that it's always going to change, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think if we can try this model, we're going to probably have 4 weeks. I think we can try to get through 4 weeks, get it through February vacation. And I think by February vacation, that's probably going to be the next time that, as administrators, we're sitting around thinking, okay, we just lived this for a few cycles. What are the tweaks we need to make going forward to try to make it better? And I think that the goal, and I think that is, I just hope people realize that. I know it seems like a lot of change, and I know change can be difficult, but our goal is to try to hopefully continue to move towards in-person learning. So if we don't have, if we're not willing to change and not willing to make adjustments as we can see them, then we're just going to kind of be stuck in whatever we're in for the whole year. And I think that there's going to be an opportunity. I think now, like I said, with the vaccine coming, the weather going to eventually warm back up. I mean, I think hopefully we're at a point where by the end of the year, maybe we can catch the last quarter of the year as a little more normal, So we'll see how that goes. So sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
No, thank you. Thank you for the detail. Any other
You used up
questions?
a lot of your time.
I know.
Okay. So the motion is to direct the superintendent to move forward with the steps he needs to take to implement the hybrid plus model that was detailed to us, provided the data continues to support it. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll continue to get more details out. We'll try to make sure we're communicating what those details look like to parents. And then we'll also, like I said, we do have a school committee meeting on January 11th, which would be sort of the last chance if we needed to say, hey, we've got to push this off, then there would be an opportunity to do that there if necessary. But I'm going to be optimistic that we're going to be able to get more kids back in school. So the next one's athletics. We had the winter sports update. I don't know if anyone, Athletic Director Smith is here. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions for him, or if you felt comfortable with our earlier discussion. I think if we could, kind of what we came up with was looking at maybe letting them at least have their tryouts and a couple practices, starting that maybe Monday the 21st, so that we can get the teams kind of all organized and together. And then, you know, after those kind of maybe the first 3 days or so, have that cooling off period. And then I don't know if we wanted to say they could resume again on the 5th after, so that we could have meetings on the 4th if necessary, or if you just want to say the 4th, or what the, if you guys are comfortable with that at all. So I just think that was kind of the recap of what we just talked about, but that's,
So I mean, we peppered the Board of Health with questions, and again, I am grateful for them being here. I think, you know, where they were comfortable with the plan as you outlined it, I'm comfortable with that. But
saying like the,
Oh,
so
okay.
allowing
I
them to
misunderstood
have,
what you said. No, we're good.
sorry?
I misunderstood what you said. Go ahead.
so you're saying you're comfortable with the, saying that basically like December 21st, 22nd, 23rd?
Yeah.
We'd allow them to do basketball activities, so they could do their tryout, and like I said, even the tryout, we aren't going to do it like a tradition. It's not going to be all 36 kids running gassers or whatever. It's going to be, you know, it'll be more, at least sort of probably broken up semi-team by team or grade by grade, and then kind of, you know, then they can use that to fill out what their teams are, have an opportunity to meet as their team, go over the expectations, have a little practice, and then at least get the ball rolling. Then I think we do and that wouldn't start till the 21st, which we said, at that point, there's no students, there's no staff in the building, but the building is still open, so it's not like we're, you know, so we can clean it, we can do all those things. Then do the cooling off period. I don't know if we, and this is where I guess, so do we want to do it through January 4th? To say right now, without any action, they would resume on January 5th?
Smitty, maybe you can answer this question. Is the cooling off period recommended or, for lack of a better term, you know, demanded? Like, I mean, essentially, there's to be no activity during that period. Can you help us understand what that really means? Because I see it says recommended dead period. I'm just curious as to what it means.
So at first, it sounded like it was going to be a mandated period. They decided to lay back to that, and they just decided to go with your local district on how they wanted to do, what they wanted to do with that local period. I think I put in the packet notes, so I asked our other pod members what they were doing. They said they were going to take a mini cooling period, I believe, and they were going to come back and return to practice on the 28th through December 30th, and then take the new year, then come back after the new year.
And the only reason I asked the question, Dr. Meyer, is because I know when I listened to the Board of Health, they said, so what you're asking for is once the building's empty, do we feel comfortable with you guys sort of getting situated? So, I mean, if that's the case, well, the building's empty at 2:30 on Friday. So, you know, if they're only going to get 5 days anyway, before like the cooling off period, and we're going to hold them to the cooling off period being mandated, then I'd recommend we give them the 5 days if they can get in the building, whether it's starting Friday afternoon and then Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they're done because it's Christmas Eve. And the cooling off period's mandated, so then they're gone until the 4th anyway. And that at least gives them, like, I guess the equivalent of not even a week to kind of situate themselves. If we're not planning on it being mandated and the Board of Health is comfortable with them having activities because the building's empty, then the building's empty. So, you know, no one's really impacted or at any risk if they're practicing in the building. So I think we just needed to, I don't know whether we decide or we don't, but I think we just need to, from a guidance perspective, decide, is it guidance or is it mandated? And then,
Right, and I just say,
if the building's empty, where are we on it?
right, and the only other thing, and it's a logistical thing we'll have to come up with anyway, but I just, you know, like if you say they're going to do it Friday afternoon, well, Friday, that means we got to change all our custodial coverage.
And maybe it's
we
not
gotta do that,
Friday,
or,
you know, but I'm saying,
yeah.
so, I'm just saying in general, they probably have those 4 or 5 days and that's it. If the cooling off period is truly mandated by whoever's mandating it, was the MIA or whoever is putting it out there. But
Yeah, I kind of, I think Joel alluded to it. I think my recommendation is to go with the 3 days, you know, 21st, 22nd, 23rd of the tryouts. Let them, you know, determine who's going to play at what level, and then take the whole cooling off period tell them, as of right now, you'll start on the 5th, because the board, just like we did with this stage, then the Board of Health met that morning. We can schedule, I think there's a meeting for the 4th based off of those numbers. I mean, we're going to know for the most part anyway, let's be honest. I mean, you're going to know if this stuff's all rolled back. I understand what Matt's saying, the building's going to be empty, but based off of kind of the, I won't say guidance, but the input from the Board of Health, and ultimately when it comes to the public buildings, they do have the final say. And the fact that, we kind of asked this question before they left is, those were they kind of felt comfortable with the 3 days of just bringing those, set kids in that you need to really evaluate. And then, because you're talking boys and girls and you're talking one gym. And then, like you say, take that cooling off period to the 5th, and, we're all, like somebody said, we're all in the same boat. I mean, I think all the towns that are saying they're in, they're all doing what we are doing, right? They're all saying, hey, we're in, so they're not out. But if they're all going to be, affected by the same phase or step that we're going to hit. I just don't want to say, hey, you could definitely start on the 5th, and then on the 4th, we have to have an emergency meeting and stop them, because then you get that, false hope where you just say, now we're going to let you do the tryout. Your coaches, and I did read in the packet, Smitty, correct me if I'm wrong, but the coaches are allowed during that cooling off period to meet with their players remotely, right? They can coach them remotely, they can keep in contact with them, keep them motivated, keep them up for it. And then we'll say, hey, right now, based off these numbers, we think you'll be able to start practice on the 5th. And that still gives you two weeks before the first game. And then on the 4th, if things are good, we give them that blessing and off they go. And if not, we'll deal with it then. But that's my recommendation, so that we just, we're not going to have to say yes and then stop everything come the 5th. Thanks.
Any other thoughts? So let's see if I can capture this here. So we are, would someone like to make a motion to, well, we've already made the motion to do this, right? I don't know what we would be taking action on. We've already taken action to allow the athletic director in the school district to implement a plan, provided that the data allows it to continue. So I don't know that we should be the ones dictating.
It's true, I don't know, because you voted to allow us to opt in. The motion last time was voted to opt in no sooner than December 15th. So I guess at this point, we wouldn't really need
I don't think we need to take additional
motion.
action
We would
on
just, we were following we're complying with that same motion. And I think we know now that, based on our discussion with the Board of Health, we're comfortable kicking the season off on the 21st. And we'll go from there. And I think our next, we'll get those 3 days done, and then we'll have our next kind of reeval on the 4th if we need it. And that's the next Board of Health meeting. And we'll see where we are. I mean, those next couple of weeks could be pretty telling in terms of, where the state is as a whole and how everything looks. And hopefully, I keep saying, hopefully, if we're optimistic, that everyone's still just, it's a go, and we're going to keep going. And like I said, we still get 2 weeks of practice in for the, we have secured that bye for kind of the first possible week of games. So we know we would still get 2 full weeks of practice in. I think one of the restrictions is 5 days of practice a week. So they would be able to get a full 5 days in, even if they had to start on Tuesday the 5th. They could go those 4 days and come in on Saturday. So, I think it's I think it's a way to try to hopefully get the ball rolling, get the kids engaged, and hopefully salvage the season if we can.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much for all your hard work.
All right.
So we have to take action on scheduling a tentative meeting on the 4th of January? Or we'll just...
It's up to you. I mean, we can, so the only thing I would think about on the 4th, I just wasn't sure. I figured, I don't know if we wanted to have one of those sort of like remote meetings if necessary, just in case kind of coming after the holidays, if there was some craziness that we needed to just sort of discuss, we could do so. And I know the Board of Health has their meeting. I think their meeting's in the evening. I think it's at 5 o'clock.
I think it's prudent at least to have a placeholder. We made a lot of decisions tonight and had a lot of discussion tonight about what the data might look like.
Yep.
So
So I think I'll probably do it in, I'd like to do it, I'd like to post this one as a remote meeting, if that's okay. I think that one would be just because it's one of those like if necessary ones, and it'll just be easier if we can just kind of, instead of setting everything up. And then the, probably our regular time, like a 7 o'clock meeting, because like I said, I think the Board of Health is going to meet at 5. So if there's any action that they have to take, we would be, or recommendations that they have, we would be able to adjust that at that time. So if we found out that, the Board of Health decided to roll back a phase or something like that, we would know that by that meeting, and we could make any adjustments we needed and try to get communication out to our families in a timely manner if it was going to negatively impact any of our plans. If it doesn't look like it and we want to, if like you said, it's a placeholder, if we schedule it sort of as that if needed emergency meeting, then if we decide to just say, no, we're good, then we're good. So, okay?
Yeah, thanks.
So tentatively put that as remote only and at 7 o'clock. Oh, did you need to, are you guys okay? You don't need to vote on that, do you? We're
No.
okay, yeah.
No, I'm fine.
Facility director update. So Mike Ward and I met with a company looking at a potential consultant to try to see. There was a company that was recommended to us that we met with. They kind of had another guy that they found, and they were sort of trying to put together, some thoughts on this. The idea was not that the consultant would be a full-time replacement or anything like that. The idea was more of a short-term consultant that might be able to either step in immediately to help with some of the day-to-day stuff, and maybe help to provide, once we do bring on board somebody, to help with some of the overarching goals of like, building assessments and those types of things. So that's one option. I'll be honest with you, I don't know how promising it was. I mean, the guys seemed really intelligent and great, but they were definitely more towards sort of helping us with like the long-term planning, not really the immediate help with anything for like the day-to-day. So that was, so I don't know if it's something that we're going to have to make any real decision on in a timely manner, because I don't think it would impact sort of the day-to-day operation stuff. The meeting was held with the search committee. The first meeting of the search committee was held on December 10th. And our next meeting at that was scheduled for, what do I mean?
Was it Wednesday?
I think it's Wednesday. Yeah.
Wednesday?
16th, yeah, December 16th. And so we're hoping to kind of have some sort of get moving on getting our first round of interviews ready by then. So at least that's up and running. So I just wanted
Thank you
to.
very much.
Yeah.
We had, of our subcommittees, we have reports from 3 of them, I believe, right? Safety Committee, Marketing, and Negotiations? Or no, Negotiations has a meeting coming up.
Yeah, so it's just kind of updates. Safety Committee met last Friday. Marketing Committee, we're still just, the December newsletter will be going out this week. Guadalupe has been working on that. She got a draft for us to start reviewing today, so that should be coming out. And then tomorrow, the negotiations team has a meeting just to kind of preliminarily get our stuff.
Okay.
Time? I thought we said 5:30, didn't we? Is it 5:30 tomorrow, Matt?
Tomorrow,
For the strategy meeting, or the negotiations meeting?
I think it was 5:30. Yep.
I could look it up in another email that you sent me.
Yeah,
here.
I got 5:30 in my
5:30.
calendar.
Okay, there you go, 5:30 it is.
Steve, are we doing that at central office?
Yeah, if you guys, you comfortable with that?
Yeah,
It's
that's
good.
fine.
It should be small. We
Yep.
can space out in the conference room there.
All right, thank you very much for the updates. Anything under old business? Anything under new business? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. All those in favor?
It's the only motion they let me make.
We stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Happy holidays to everyone.